A lot of Europeans and people around the world are really struggling to understand the Trump administration, and the simple fact is, it's because you're not deeply in the know about Christian nationalist ideology and theology and their view of how everything exists in the world. But funny enough, we have a well-published author on our White House staff, Mr. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. See, Pete is a very actually well-published author. He's got a whole bunch of books and for years has had podcasts or been on podcasts where he has spent hundreds and hundreds of hours discussing his political and ideological positions. And in one of his two books, and this is the 2020 book American Crusade, we can get a very strong, clear understanding of all the things that are currently happening in the second Trump administration. And don't think this is like secret information or something. You can get the audiobook yourself on Google Play. Something important to understand is Pete views himself as a literal modern-day Christian crusader fighting in a religious ideological battle against what he sees as his opponents, the forces of the left and the forces of Islam around the world. He even has crusader tattoos, as we can see right here, all over his body. He starts the book off by talking about the Christian Crusades of the 11th century, giving a fantasy version that has long been bandied about in Christian nationalist spheres, that instead of it being an invasion by Western Christian countries into the Middle East, where they primarily massacred a huge amount of Eastern Christians, primarily Jewish people, and of course lots of Muslims, and wrecked the place, and eventually, critically, were defeated and kicked out, and in the meantime managed to conquer another Christian empire, the literal Eastern Roman Empire, or the Byzantines. Yes, a strong defense of Christianity where you end up losing and destroying the most powerful Christian country in the region. He adds such astutely, enjoy Western civilization, freedom, equal justice under the law, thank a crusader. Hegseth is deeply paranoid about Muslims and is a deep believer in the Great Replacement theory, stating things like, radical mosques and schools are allowed to operate. Religious police control certain sections of many towns. Sharia councils dot the underground landscape. Pervasive political correctness prevents dissent among disastrous policies such as open borders and non-assimilation. Take the British cities of London, Birmingham, Leeds, Blackburn, Sheffield, Oxford, Luton, Oldham, and Rochdale. What do they all have in common? They have all had Muslim mayors. The British were invaded, and they don't even know it. In one generation, absent radical policy change, the United Kingdom will neither be united nor a Western kingdom. The United Kingdom is done for. Our present moment is much like the 11th century. We don't want to fight, but like our fellow Christians 1,000 years ago, we must. We need an American crusade. We Christians, alongside our Jewish friends and their remarkable army in Israel, need to pick up the sword of an unapologetic Americanism and defend ourselves. And here Americanism just means fascism with a red, white, and blue flag. For us as American crusaders, Israel embodies the soul of our American crusade, the why to our what. Faith, family, freedom, and free enterprise. If you love those, learn to love the state of Israel, and then find an arena in which to fight for her. Hegseth is also obsessed with a conspiracy theory around a Muslim concept called Hijra. This is when the Prophet Muhammad, basically because he was facing discrimination for his new religion in Mecca, left to go to Medina. And it is a story mainly about how you escape persecution. Well, Mr. Hegseth has a quite unique view on it. Instead, he presents the idea that it is instead a secret plot for Muslims to infiltrate every aspect of society. Yes, again, leaning into Great Replacement theories and, of course, some random Western Christian white dude not understanding a simple concept of Muslim history. He also presents the idea that hardcore leftism provides the best gateway for Islamism. And this comes from a very old school far-right idea coming out of the new French right of the 60s and 70s, that there's a secret conspiracy amongst Muslims and leftists to basically destroy Western civilization. And this goes back to a bunch of far-right French philosophers of that time. And it has unfortunately been picked up for decades now. And Pete Hegseth, as one of the people that come out of this ideological lineage that stretches right back to the new French right, he's a deep proponent of this idea. But these are actually his more tame beliefs. He also believes that the US should get rid of the Geneva Convention, and in his book that he published last year, he was advocating for civil war. He also wants everyone to know that the defense of Europe is not our problem. Been there, done that twice. NATO is a relic and should be scrapped and remade in order for freedom to be truly defended. This is what Trump is fighting for. He also adds that the United Nations is a, quote, a fully globalist organization that aggressively advances an anti-American, anti-Israel, and anti-freedom agenda. Here's one set of rules for the United States and Israel and another for everyone else. In American Crusade, he explicitly says that, quote, we have domestic enemies and we have international allies. It's time to reach out to learn people who value the same principles, relearn lessons from them, and form stronger bonds. And quotes specifically that he considers people that support Israel, along with the European far right and supporters of Brexit, as reservoirs of American values. Quote, Americanism is alive in Israel, where Benjamin Netanyahu boldly stands against international anti-Semitism and Islamism. Americanism is alive in the hearts of Brexiteers in the United Kingdom who yearn for national sovereignty. Americanism is alive in places such as Poland, which reject the globalist visions of leftist bureaucrats in old Europe. And just to keep in mind, this was when Poland had the Law and Justice Party. The current government of Poland, another conservative government, but just not a far-right one, is considered too liberal for the current Pete Hegseth. But considering yesterday Pete Hegseth closed an office that entire job is to prevent civilian casualties in military conflict, his comments about the Geneva Code and war crimes are particularly troubling from his 2024 book, The War on Warriors. The key question of our generation, of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, is way more complicated. What do you do if your enemy does not honor the Geneva Convention? We never got an answer, only more war, more casualties, and no victory. What if we treated the enemy the way they treated us? Would that have not been an incentive for the other side to reconsider their barbarism? Hey, Al-Qaeda, if you surrender, we might spare your life. If you do not, we'll rip off your arms and feed them to the hogs. We are just fighting with one hand behind our back, and the enemy knows it. If our warriors are forced to follow rules arbitrarily and asked to sacrifice more laws so that the international tribunals feel better about themselves, aren't we just better off winning our wars according to our own rules? Who cares what the other countries think? If we're going to send our boys to fight, and it should be boys, we need to unleash them to win. They need to be the most ruthless, the most uncompromising, the most overwhelmingly lethal they can be. They must break the enemy's will. It's noticeable to include that in 2019, Hegseth convinced Trump to pardon U.S. war criminals, stating that our troops will make mistakes, and when they do, they should be given the overwhelming benefit of the doubt. And I need to reemphasize that this man is yearning for a civil war in the U.S. to defeat his so-called leftist enemies, stating that leftists have surrounded traditional American patriots on all sides, ready to close in for the kill, killing our founders, killing our flag, killing capitalism. Irreconcilable differences between the left and the right in America, leading to perpetual conflict that cannot be resolved through the political process. The hour is late for America. Beyond political success, her fate relies on exercising the leftist specter, dominating education, religion, and culture. A 360-degree holy war for the righteous cause of human freedom. He also writes of the military and police taking sides in a perceived civil war, with patriots, including himself, on one side versus all of the people that he sees as his enemies. He explicitly rejects democracy, saying, for leftists, calls for democracy represent a complete rejection of our system. Watch how often they use the word. They hate America, so they hate the Constitution and want to quickly amass 51% of the votes to change it. He also explicitly supports rigging elections, stating, playing nice to placate the so-called middle has been a losing strategy for patriots for decades. The other side is stacked with enemies of freedom. Republican legislatures should draw congressional lines that advantage pro-freedom candidates and screw Democrats. There is so much more to this, and if you want to learn more, let me know in the comments. But please repost, do some engagement, or else nobody's going to see it and I'm not going to get paid.